Hey everyone, it's Dr. Domingo. I hope you are all doing well. And by the background, you could probably tell I'm in someplace warm. And yes, I am on holiday with my family. I'm in Hawaii for a short vacation, but I haven't forgotten about our class. In fact, one of the things that I've been doing here while away from the continent is reading about the history of the islands. And what's interesting is, as I've been reading about the history of Hawaii, when Captain James Cook in the late 1700s landed upon the islands, and he encountered the already flourishing civilization that was here. What was interesting is, when I think about our class, what exactly, obviously we didn't call it coaching, what exactly did he do in terms of having great relations with the indigenous population here? And so history, as it dictates, Captain James Cook had landed in Hawaii and had some great exchanges of trade and such with the islands. And so over time, it expanded and it became the state that we know today. Now that's a brief history, and there's so much politics and other things there. But I want to focus on our class and what does it mean for coaching? I'm thinking of, as we've been talking about in this past chapter, these 7 frames, these 7 habits, if you will, or 7 voices that come from the mindful coach. Did James Cook actually use any of these voices? The master, reflector, guide, teacher, inspector, contractor, or partner? It's an intriguing question, and one will never know. But in any case, let's get to our class here. So far in this class, we've talked a little bit in terms of what coaching is in the first couple weeks, and then we've looked at the fuel framework for coaching, in which you attempted to do that with a colleague or a coachee, and I loved reading a little bit about your experiences. This past week, we've been looking at this 7 authentic voices for mindful coaching from Doug Silsby. And what's interesting about Silsby as an author is his whole framework, if you will, of these 7 voices of being mindful is what he calls presence-based coaching. And in presence-based coaching, what that is this framework for understanding both yourself and the coachee and being in the moment, so to speak. I was watching the Bonsai Pipeline Surfing Championships the other day, and what was fascinating about it is that the eventual winner, Kelly Slater, who is probably the greatest surfer of all time, they interviewed him after he won the championship, and he said, I just wanted to be in the presence and be in the moment. I knew I was in a competition, but my mind was focused on being present and just enjoying the moment as it is. Interesting words, because I think of being present in a coaching relationship with your coachee, and what does it mean to don't worry about all the other distractions that may come about, whether that is the environment, whether that's things that are going on in life, but just being there with your coachee and just living the moment. What a wonderful example from this surfing champion, but also a great lesson for us as coaches to think about, when we coach, being mindful of being in that moment with that person, whatever the context is. All right, so we've had a lot of time for reflective space, and we've talked about these 7 voices. Next week, what's going to happen is we are going to apply them. Just like we did with the fuel framework, we're going to pick one of these voices that you have seen, one of these 7 voices: master, reflector, guide, teacher, inspector, contractor, or partner, and try to apply it to your coaching situation. Now, as you've been writing this past week in the discussion, what I've loved seeing once again is the style or the approach or the voice or the role. I shared that graphic with you. They call it roles, but in the text it's voices. What voice do you feel comfortable with, and what voice do you want to work on? That was the discussion, and I saw some great responses from that. Next week we're going to practice that, all right? So think about, perhaps it's the voice that you want to try to bring out more, that you naturally find comfortable with you. Maybe it's the one that you want to work on. Whatever it is, I look forward to those responses. Now, finally, one of the things that I've thought about over the past few weeks as we've been talking about self-reflection and assessment is this whole idea of how does this relate to leadership? Now, coaching obviously is tied very closely to leadership development. And I teach a leadership development class as well in the program. And one of the things that I talk about in one of the classes is insight. And I think I've shared this on a previous video. Insight, or the ability to think inwardly, to think about what are the frames of reference that you're thinking of as you're meeting one-on-one with this person. Start tying it together with what leadership theory, if you will, or approach does all this self-reflection remind you of? Well, for me, it reminds me of authentic and transformational leadership. That is, in a transformational leadership approach, one is empowering, one is uplifting, one is gaining valuable self-expression, etc. Authentic leadership, of course, talks about the inward work, the honesty, the values, the value-driven leadership. Blending those two things together, it seems natural that it's a fit with presence or mindfulness in coaching. In any case, those are some connections that I thought were interesting, and perhaps you have some connections that you'd like to share too. Could be a different leadership theory, whether it's situational or even something like adaptive leadership. Whatever it is, I hope to see those in your future posts. And don't forget, Module 6, we're going to be doing a big assignment. But for now, Module 4, continue on with the discussion. You've been doing great work so far. Next week, more practice with some coaching frameworks, preparing for Module 6. And next week marks the halfway point of our class. In any case, great to see you all. You're doing a great job in class, and I will see you all soon. Aloha.